Well, in the last 24 hours, it's come to light that the United States Department of State indeed has released a report that is pretty damning when it comes to our human rights record as a country. It's put us in a pretty terrible light in the eyes of the world. I want to look at this a bit more critically. What does this mean for our image across the world and the things they catalog, some of which we already know about? Let's get into it and let's look at what this means for us, the implications of this. You recall on the same network, we did a lot about this first issue that they catalog, which is the Fix the Country movement and the murder of Ibrahim Kaka Macho. You know him. He died in the wake of several agitations and activism. The report links it directly to the Fix the Country. They talk about the protests that happened, and then they also go to the election 2020, the fact that 8 people were killed. We still don't have closure on it 2 years after the elections, and that international report, the US report, is capturing that now, giving us a pretty bad name in the eyes of the international community. Again, at least we saw 2 people were killed by the National Election Security Task Force, according to this particular report, composed of the military and the police units. Also 2 deaths from civilian violence. All of this related to the elections of 2020. Again, unresolved. The report is now shining a light on this almost 2 years on. Still with the elections, we saw the inspectorate, the lawsuits, the separate lawsuits that were filed. 6 residents of the Techiman South constituency who suffered injuries, and the father whose son died sued the IGP and the AG. They were asking for 2.5 million as compensation. We know that at the beginning of this, there was some controversy about the compensation payments. We're not sure yet if the compensations have been paid, but the US State Department report is capturing this now. The suits also demanded an official investigation into the security force killings and support for affected families. One of those things that we again need closure on. In fact, on the back of the killings that we saw in Idra, the Idra committee report also makes similar recommendations about compensation. That is also something that we wait to see what happened. But 2 NDC members of parliament had taken some of the issues, including the killings in elections, to the charge. One of them is my guest tonight. What has happened of that? We'll get into that shortly, because the report captures that as well, about the Stroud report. Now, if you come to the media, again, this US State Department report makes for very heartbreaking reading if you look at the attack on journalism and press freedom. It doesn't make for interesting reading at all. It casts a pretty gloomy picture of the state of press freedom in Ghana, and it cites several examples, one of which is David Tamaklo's arrest, online news editor, in April 2021. One of the things that was cited, Caleb Kude's arrest also. Another one that became a very big topic for conversation after he was himself brutalized by armed police officers in 2021, has found his way into the report being read by the international community, and of course, very notorious for his verbal attacks on journalists, including our own Erasasari Donko, which was mentioned, by the way, in the report. And the sad thing about this is we did a campaign to get some sanctions for him, and I must put this in context. The US State Department has captured this. Part of the reason, I suppose, is when he made those verbal comments about my colleague, we took this up very seriously, and we wrote to the international community. We wrote to diplomatic, diplomatic partners, including the United States, the U.S. embassy here in Ghana. We wrote to them because you know that he frequents the U.S. court very, very frequently, and we wrote to them, drawing attention to his conduct there. And no wonder that the State Department report had captured his comments as part of their damning, report on the country's human rights record when it comes to dealing with the media. And so that's one of the things on the media. Also talking about corruption, they also relies very heavily on the Auditor General's report. But I find this interesting, something I didn't know until I read it. The report also talks about this corrupt practices resulting in 340 million of financial mismanagement, including misapplication, misappropriation of funds, theft, and procurement mismanagement. But then also, they go to the DC office. Of course, Washington, DC is the capital of the US. No wonder they have information on this about some visa fees totaling $355,000 that the US State Department now says the Honorary Consul General and the Ghanaian consulate there could not account for. That's corruption. They talk about the Free Senior High School Secretariat misspending more than $3.16 million. And then former Minister of Tourism retained 3 official vehicles for personal use after leaving office. Now, we've isolated this a bit today. Their comment on the judiciary. They claim that the judiciary was subject to unlawful influence and corruption. The truth is, if you read the report, it's very scanty on the evidence to back this, but that's a point that they make in the report nonetheless. Judicial officials reportedly accepted bribes to expedite or postpone cases, lose records, or issue favorable rulings. And so this will have to do with judges, right? For the payer of the bribe. Considering that this is coming from the State Department, the US State Department, there's a lot of emphasis and weight that the rest of the world will put on this. Government has not commented on this. We've tried to get some government reaction to this. We're having no reaction. You would possibly hope that this is about the judiciary. Possibly the Chief Justice may see it and may want to either ask for further clarity and evidence or get some perspective on this, at least to get the other side of the story. But that's as far as it goes, as far as what the report says on this. And then they also talk about arbitrary arrest of LGBTQ and activists that we saw that incident happen last year in the midst of the debates surrounding the LGBTQ bill. And the June authorized release of activists on June 11 and dropped the case in August. This is all part of the things that they catalog. And so the key question to ask is, does any of this surprise us? If it doesn't, do we have to wait for the State Department to catalog things, some of which we know already? But most importantly, what does this do to Ghana's image abroad? And can it be salvaged? Should we even care? My guests are joining me to discuss after this break. And thank you very much for staying with us on PM Express. My guest joining me is Professor Kwesi Aning. He is a Director, Faculty of Academic Affairs and Research at the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. Also joining me is Suleiman Abrahima, Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa. In the studio with me is Samuel Kujetu-Ablakwa, who is a ranking member of the Foreign Affairs Committee of Parliament. I want to quickly get thoughts first of Professor Kwesi Aning, who joins us on the line. Doc, thank you for your time here on PM Express.
Right, Ivan.
Great to have you. Let me read a line from the report for you. It says, quote, significant human rights issues included criminal reports of arbitrary and unlawful killings by the government and its agents, cases of cruel and inhuman and degrading treatment or punishment by the government or on behalf of the government. This sounds pretty serious. I mean, for the United States to be directly accusing our government of engaged in unlawful killings and degrading treatment and punishment of individuals. What's your take on this?
Well, we've raised these concerns before that of the United States government. So, I mean, what is the big deal here? Every single example cited in this report, and therein lies my disappointment with the way this report is being handled, is that people have raised their voices about the way the judiciary works, about corruption, about police brutality, about the usage of, weapons and firearms in situations where they ought not to be used. So, are we saying that when Ghanaian activists raise their voices and point to gaps and weaknesses in our society and in our politics, it is not important and so Uncle Sam and his agents have written. I mean, is that what we are saying? That when activists and those who are fighting for rule of law, the respect for human rights, accountability, transparency, the way our financial resources are used, that those voices and those struggles don't matter? My argument is that they do matter. And that we need to place more emphasis on internal struggle and make these external reportage ancillary to what is happening here. Because no one is going to bring improvement nor changes apart from the people of Ghana themselves. And I think we need to recognize those who are placing their lives online, those who are being brutalized for whatever reason, and recognize those struggles. Because were we to turn the focus round and to look at what happens in the United States, I doubt very much if the Ghanaian ambassador in Washington would have stayed in his office for more than an hour without being called to the State Department and being given some talking to.
I mean, interesting views there, Doc. Prof, stay with me. Let me bring in Samokudu Blakwa, who, by the way, chairs, is a ranking on the Foreign Affairs Committee. You agree with his thoughts there? One, about we shouldn't wait for this, the U.S. to tell us. We know already. And that the emphasis should not be on their report. It should be stuff that we know already and what we do internally. He has a point there, as you know.
Well, let me extend warm regards to you, Evans, and to Prof. and Suleiman Ibrahima, and certainly to all our viewers. It is important for us to put this report in proper perspective. The United States of America is not picking on Ghana alone. The United States of America has been putting out these country human rights reports since 1961, when it passed the Foreign Assistance Act, and then when it passed the Trade Act of 1974. So per their own laws, it is a requirement that countries that you often assist and countries that sit with you at the United Nations and you work with, you collaborate with, you must carry out these human rights assessments every year. And the reason why it is important, particularly for countries they assist under the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961, is because the citizens of the United States of America want to be sure that, particularly when their governments say that they are investing in governance institutions, they are seeking to, as it were, enhance the governance architecture, the rule of law, and all of those values, those ethos that the international community subscribes to. They want to be sure that there is value for money and that you are not pumping taxpayers' money, hard-earned taxpayers' money, and there are no results. So we need to put this report in that context. And so for that matter, you have as many as 198 countries that were assessed in this latest report, the 2021 country reports on human rights practices, 198. So Ghana is one out of 198 countries assessed. Now, Professor Enin has an interesting point about, if Ghana had done this, wouldn't our ambassador in Washington be summoned? I think that once this context is explained, you cannot therefore, conclude that the United States is picking on Ghana or probably has some axe to grind with Ghana. It is because their laws, allows them to do this, and it's also some peer review mechanism. There's been an interesting development in this global geopolitics, and that is China. China realized that the United States has been doing this for nearly 5 decades. Nobody is assessing them. So China has decided over the last few years that every year they will also put out a human rights report on the United States of America.
Okay.
So this year, in February, they released their own assessment of the United States of America's human rights, credentials. And that's also a space to watch. It's quite interesting. You see the geopolitics playing out. And nothing stops us as a country from also writing a report on the US, like China is doing. And let me also add that peer review is a principle that we have always welcomed. Remember NEPAD. And even within the Committee of Nations, every now and then we like to carry out this assessment. Why is it that when we have elections, for example, we open our doors to international observers to come in? We could as well say that, we are a sovereign nation, nobody should come here. We're going to conduct our elections, we'll put out our report, take it or leave it. But we don't do that. Every country every now and then opens up, welcomes other, sovereign countries to assess them, to look at what they are doing. And so I do not want us to, at this point, play the, we versus them, America trying to be a big boy, wanting to dictate to us, wanting to, tell us how to go about our work. When you go through Appendix A of this report, which I have done, the United States of America is clear that these reports are largely, if I can quote verbatim, it says, the country reports on human rights practices are prepared by reviewing information available from a wide variety of credible sources, including US and foreign government officials, victims of alleged human rights abuses. And this point is important. I heard you last night confirm that when your colleague journalist was threatened by the Honorable Kennedy Japan, you did petition the US Embassy, So victims of alleged human rights abuses, academic and congressional studies, and reports from the press, international organizations, and non-governmental organizations, NGOs, concerned with human rights, particularly helpful for citation are NGOs, whether within a single country or those with an international perspective, unquote. So you realize that there's really nothing in this report that you will not find in other reports. For example, if you take the criticism about press freedom, you notice that we have been on the decline. Yeah. If you take the World Press Freedom Index, we have dropped from being number 1 in Africa, we are now number 3.
Media Foundation for West Africa's records was something that they had used.
Exactly, and they reference that. If you take, for example, corruption, you see that on the CPI, the Corruption Perception Index, we scored 43. We are below average. We have been very stagnant. And indeed, if you look at the best performance under President Akufo-Addo, is the worst performance, under President Mahama. And, governance experts have a Ghana Integrity Initiative. I was at a roundtable where we discussed how do we make progress? Because we are just, marking time, we are below average. And you see other countries.
That's Prof's question. If that's the case, and indeed that's the reality, why must the US see the need to put all this together in their own report when substantively, would it change, for example, their foreign relations with us, their support with us? Because they tie this to assistance.
Yes.
Right? But this is based on the Foreign Assistance Act.
Yes.
But does it influence how the US relates with Ghana, for example, on the back of the damning findings? If it's not, then what's the point?
No, it does. It does. For example, if you look at the portions relating to human trafficking, it does, because there is a special focus on human rights relating to human trafficking record, and there's a separate report which they spend substantial time on. Under this, country human rights report, they only highlight, they provide a summary, but there's another detailed report, and it influences, even financial assistance, whether they will collaborate with you. And I recall that in recent years, we have had to work so hard to create even shelters. Earlier, they were concerned that we didn't have shelters for, victims of human rights abuses, specifically relating to human trafficking and then, domestic violence. So it is tied to assistance, to all kinds of,
So there are real consequences
all kinds of support. There
for
are.
Ghana
There are.
in terms of our relationship with America because of the findings they've made in this report.
Absolutely. And you see, there are other investors who also look at this report, and they advise themselves as to how they want to relate to us. And remember that the report says from the appendices that they are talking to active actors in the country, including, the business community, including, civil society organizations, NGOs, academia, and a wide range of persons. Remember that their embassies, their diplomatic missions, send in reports. Indeed, if you go to Appendix C, they let you in on the format. By every, diplomatic mission, by July, the forms are sent. They must start filling them by September. A draft report is ready every year. They take this exercise very seriously. It's part of the KPIs for the ambassadors. So if you look at all of these matters, take, for example, the Mo Ibrahim Index on African Governance. You see that Ghana is ranked number 8. Some of the matters that are really militating against our progress to the top, getting to number 1, are some of this election-related violence, the killings. And you see, when you go through this report, you see the inertia, how government does not respond timeously. We don't have closures to matters. I mean, take Ayawaso West Wagon.
Because I'll come to the specifics. Because I know one of the things you've taken up, I'll isolate a few of the specifics. I want to isolate the media now because press freedom was big in this report. Let me bring in Media Foundation for West Africa's boss, Suleiman Abrama, who's joining me via Zoom. Sule, thank you for your time on PM Express. Please unmute for me. Hello, Mr. Brima. Please
Thank you very much for having me, Evans.
Fantastic, I can hear you. I mean, I want to isolate the press part of this. And on the theme that Professor Inning started us off on, there's a serial offender that the report isolates in the name of Kennedy Japan. If you check the previous report, he was captured in there as well. He's been captured again. When we petitioned the U.S. embassy, we did so because we know of his relationship with the U.S. He seemed to really like that country. Does it strike you as curious that the U.S. consistently cites him as an offender, and yet I doubt if we've seen any sanction directly from the U.S. on him as a member of parliament who frequents that country? Is that double standards? What's your reaction to that?
Well, Evans, if you recall, there was a time when Kennedy Japan revealed that he was once detained in the US, at an airport for almost 12 hours in connection with reports around the murder of Ahmed Swale. And he was quite furious, and at that time, indicated that, look, he knew nothing about the incident, and to the extent that US authorities would detain him at the port for almost half a day, it was something that infuriated him in his quest to say that he wanted to expose Anas and all those claims that he made, which eventually landed him in court. I think there is a limit to what the US can do, because if there is evidence that, look, this happened and it can be directly attributed to him, I believe that the US government would have acted. But we have a situation where this same MP at some point says, look, I know the people who killed, or the one who killed Ahmed Swale. The person is in Kumasi. He gave out the name and says that, look, this information was given to me by the police. So you wonder, why hasn't this person who is named and known by the police, why hasn't he been picked up? So I think that it is the whole situation of gross impunity and somebody being seen to be above the law under a regime that appears not to be too serious about issues of press freedom, issues of media freedom, issues of free speech. And I have said elsewhere that, look, if things continue this way, President Akufo-Addo would go down as the president who presided over the worst regime in terms of press freedom, freedom of expression, and free speech. And we can talk about all the other incidences that have happened, including the reactivation and vigorous application of that old law used tantamount to law with the possibility of causing fear and panic. And indeed, in 2010, when the law was used to charge Ato Kwame Nadazi, then Ajoy FM, and Nana Dakwa Befi, who appeared on, I think it was Top FM, and insinuated or said that President Rawlings had set his own house ablaze. At that time, when the police picked these two people and charged them for publication of false news, President Akufo-Addo, then candidate Akufo-Addo, leading the opposition MPP at the time, did accuse the Mills administration of really taking all steps to suppress and repress press freedom, and did say that, look, the government was doing so because it is bereft of the principle that it could have used so easily, which was criminal libel law. And because criminal libel law was no longer available, they've gone to the cobwebs, picked up the old law, dusted it, and were applying it to repress press freedom. And indeed, President Akufo-Addo said at that time that, look, that whole piece of law was unconstitutional. So it is quite baffling that under his regime, we are seeing the application of that law more than ever before under the Fourth Republic. So if you put all these things together, plus actions by national security, the incident of Caleb Kuda, the incident of modern Ghana, what happened at Asankregwa, where a journalist was almost killed by a national security operative, and yet nobody this is justice. Nobody has been incarcerated. You wonder whether we have an administration that cares about press freedom and free speech. And as I've said, if it continues this way, I wouldn't be surprised that President Akufo-Addo and his government would be the worst regime we have had in terms of press freedom and freedom of expression.
I mean, Professor Aining, to the extent that many of the cases that they catalog remain unresolved, and I'll come to Samokudu Tablako about one of the central ones, the killing of 8 people in the election, still unresolved. A lot of the cases still pending. Definitely, this report carries a bit of substance, consequence for a country like Ghana, coming from a superpower. A lot of the other, Western world, will take this seriously, tied to foreign aid and assistance. Definitely, we should care. Our government should care about the fact that the U.S. State Department says this about us. You agree?
Look, the Foreign Assistance Act is politics, and it's geopolitics to the core. I don't have anything against it. I don't have anything against the content of the report, whether it relates to Ghana or Denmark or Togo or Benin. My point basically is that every single incident that Honorable Okuyota Blasa has spoken about, that my brother from the Media Foundation has spoken about, are issues that activists in Ghana have raised concerns about, spoken about, raised their voices, demonstrated. So I'm asking for a focus or a refocus. How do we support these domestic forces for change so that the actions that they take can yield the fruits that they are looking for? Okay, there isn't any new thing in that document that people in Ghana haven't fought against. I mean, we've discussed the issues of the media. We can discuss about police brutality.
Except that our local voices appears not to be taken seriously at times. And so when you have a big superpower with a big hammer, maybe that then will get the government's attention because they know they may lose something there.
Look, I'm very happy that Honorable Okudjote Ablakwa used the word geopolitics. And he also mentioned China. If our foreign and defense policy people are swayed enough, and Honorable Okudjote Ablakwa knows, the shifting sands of geopolitics in West Africa and the Sahel means that this report will remain what it is. Ghana, as a non-permanent member of the Security Council, voice is needed in the vote against the Russia-Ukraine war. Ghana's voice and vote is needed in several things. So corners would be cut, deals would be cut. And I give a very poignant example. When the U.S. Embassy in Accra brought out that travel advisory about 2 months ago, that there were unsubstantiated reports about possible extremist infiltration and violence in the north, and that people should be careful. I mean, why do you put out such an advisory when the basis for that report was unsubstantiated? Okay, there's a certain, and here I want Honorable Okujecha Ablakwa to speak to this. There's a certain lacuna in terms of our defense and security policy that allows some of our bigger partners basically to attempt to run roughshod over us. But in the last 2 to 3 months, the geopolitics have shifted so dramatically that I think this report was in preparation way before the Russian-Ukrainian war. Otherwise, quite a lot of the things in there might not have come up, because our vote on the council is needed, our support is needed. So this report would not do very much to change the dynamics of what we are seeing. And therein lies my argument that yes, it's nice to get some rhetorical support from outside, but the dynamic that will bring about the change relates to the domestic one. Those who have been fighting for change for human rights, rule of law, accountability, anti-corruption, transparency, and all those. That is what we should be focusing on and asking ourselves, how do we strengthen those forces to bring about the change for a stable, functional, democratic Ghana?
So let me ask you for a final verdict. Is it your verdict that this report then has no value and impact at all for us?
It will have no value. It will have zero impact and doesn't have any value for anyone. Certainly not for the people of Ghana, and certainly not for the issues that are raised inside that report.
Those are strong words. You agree?
Very, very strong words, and I don't shy away from it at all. I've described the report and its contents relating to Ghana as utterly useless and rubbish, and not worth the paper it's listed on. It won't bring any change. Change will only come when we strengthen the domestic forces. It may take a long time, but change will come.
Prof, stay with me. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I said it will.
Yes, Prof, stay with me briefly.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. Would you agree with that, Mr. Okujecha Ablakwa?
I respectfully disagree with Prof. Peer assessment is critical. You cannot downplay it. Having said that, you come to the content. Prof admits that everything contained in this report is accurate, it's not new, it's been raised by local activists. I have also added in my earlier submission that all of the content is corroborated by other independent reports. I've cited the Corruption Perception Index, I've cited the World Press Freedom Report, I've cited the Mo Ibrahim Index for African Governance. I was headed to the
election-related...
The Afrobarometer.
Afrobarometer.
The Afrobarometer, which also confirms, if you look at the round 8, the latest Afrobarometer, when they asked the most corrupt institutions, the Afrobarometer said 57% of respondents, of Ghanaians, said the police, number one. Number two, judges and magistrates came second, 40%. Members of parliament, unfortunately, my own institution, which I belong to, we came third, 36% of respondents. Civil servants followed, 34%. So I have a difficulty appreciating Prof's point of view. You cannot say that the content is not new. It is accurate. Local activists have raised these matters. And then in the same breath, you say that it's of no value, it will make any impact. I think that is quite incongruous.
So where's the impact and where's the value?
So the value is that even for the local forces that Professor Eni wants us to encourage and to strengthen, you know what this does? It motivates them. They see that, okay, the United States of America and other external bodies are watching. They place value on our work. Government also, and all those elements in the security agencies who think that they can harass, they can intimidate, what they did to David Tamuklo, what they did to Caleb Kuda, what they did
You think they will care?
Of course. They will care. Because look, this can lead to blacklisting. Look at those 12 peace operation officers who engaged in the sexual assault in Sudan in 2018.
Which has been captured.
We all thought, including Parliament, I was the last MP to ask an urgent question on this matter in 2019. Government and all of us thought that, okay, the matter has died a natural death. The Americans are reminding us that, look, the United Nations indicted those 12. We are waiting for a report.
In fact, they followed up as of December.
As of December 2021. The Americans followed up, and they are still waiting for a response. So these things help. When you keep the pressure, when you are demanding reports, you are demanding closure, you are demanding investigations, you are demanding punishment. It helps all of us.
Has it emboldened you in your quest for justice for the 8 killed in the election?
Absolutely.
Because you have a case at the trial.
Absolutely. And you have no idea how excited I am that what the Americans have done, clearly highlighting our petition to Shraj, seeking Shraj's investigations under Article 218 of the 1992 Constitution, that those human rights violations that occurred during the 2020 elections should be investigated, and that human lives matter. We can't have a situation where 8 or 7 of our nationals have been killed during an election, and then everybody pretends that nothing happened, as if it was a bloodless, free and fair elections. With this, you can begin to imagine Shraj itself, how they will, because I've been concerned about the progress. It's been quite slow since we petitioned in August 25th. It took about 3 months for Shraj to get a response from the Minister of Defense, Interior, and then the IGP and the CDS. We were expecting that at least we will have some preliminary reports by now. It hasn't come. With this report, it serves as heat, as pressure. And Shraj would know that, look, the international community is watching. We cannot treat these petitions by these 2 MPs, with contempt. If you take the judiciary, for example, how the judiciary has been highlighted, the judiciary, the Chief Justice is under pressure this evening as I speak to you to, as it were, clear the name of that noble institution, that third arm of government. And judges will sit up because it's coming after this Afrobarometer report and other reports that raises concern.
Yeah, on the judiciary, it's actually alarming.
It's very alarming and it's very strong.
Also, very strong. Also because
strong.
They provide no evidence. Quote, judicial officials reportedly accepted bribes to expedite and postpone cases, lose records, or issue favorable rulings for the payer of the bribe. This is a U.S. government saying that about us.
Yeah.
They don't provide any evidence, and so you think that at least the judicial service will say, write to them and say, what's the basis for this?
Yes. And I want to believe that there will even be talks within diplomatic corridors, backroom channels of communication will be activated. That may even lead to some, open public, discussion as to what evidence they have. For the Americans to be this emphatic.
Unlawful influence and corruption.
Yes, very emphatic. Look, I'll be surprised if the judiciary itself does not, rise up to try to, protect its image.
And Professor Eni's point of view. that it questions also the authenticity of the report and the value we should place on it. The US government making such a serious allegation about our judiciary without providing evidence and making sweeping comments like judiciary was subject to unlawful influence and corruption. Judges and officials took bribes. But where's the evidence? We must question that too. There's a fundamental point there that we need to question. We should accept this as hook, line, and sinker.
Well, you must put this report in perspective. This is not like some list of indictment which is being sent to the International Criminal Court where you expect evidence to be attached and all of that. If you take the Afrobarometer report that I referenced earlier, it just lists institutions. It's a survey, people's experiences. It doesn't provide any evidence. And I've never heard us, charge the CDD that carries out this Afrobarometer across African countries to provide the evidence. So you see, these reports are important. Back to Professor Eni's point about how we support local activists. If you read this report carefully, under Section 2B, it catalogs how activists are being treated. For example, it says, on June 25th, authorities arrested 11 members of the Fix the Country movement as they protested outside the Accra High Court, as it considered an application to extend indefinitely a previously approved injunction against public assembly. Authorities subsequently released them on bail. The Supreme Court ultimately dismissed the case on the grounds that the Accra High Court exceeded its jurisdiction by approving the indefinite injunction against lawful political protests and allies. On June 29, following the burial of Ibrahim Kaka Mohammed of Fix the Country, see Section 1A, protests against his killing erupted in Ejura. Police and military officers deployed and clashed with protesters. Military officers reportedly fired into the advancing crowd, shooting and killing 2 persons and injuring at least 4. So you see, even the activists, the forces you say we should encourage, which I agree with Professor Eni, we should encourage them. This also helps as even greater encouragement. They see that, okay, when we come under attack, when we are assaulted, they shoot at us, some of our colleagues die on the front lines. The international community is observing, they are watching, they will report on it. This also helps the local forces that you say that we should encourage and we should place more value. Certainly, as a nationalist, as a patriot, as a Ghanaian, I will want us to, encourage our own activists. They should continue to, build a strong democracy. They should be fearless, and they should expose wrongdoing, even as members of parliament. That is our work, to carry out oversight. But you see, this helps. This gives us a lot of comfort that, look, the international community is watching, and they are paying attention to our work.
Let me bring you, Suleiman. Mr. Brahma, what's your comment on the value of this report?
Well, Evans, I think that it is very, very valuable. In the human rights work, in human rights advocacy, exposing the issues really is a major step towards dealing with the problem. Now, I believe that we are having this conversation because of this report. If this report hadn't come in, yes, we had documented these issues, we had raised concerns about them. In fact, when Honorable Kennedy Japon threatened Erastus Asaredonko, we filed a petition to Parliament and to the National Security Minister. We had the opportunity of meeting with the National Security Minister, and we brought in Erastus from Kumasi, so he was part of it, and some assurances were given and all of that. But I believe we are having this conversation because an international, partner has decided to document this and to highlight it and to amplify the fact that, look, these are matters of concern. These are matters that undermine our democracy. And even if it is for the purpose of the attention of we local actors and also the government, I believe that it is a major step towards helping us to deal with some of the issues that confront our democracy. I would be surprised if the government of Ghana, for example, decide to be quiet on this issue. I believe that they will react. They would come out and let us know where they disagree with the report, what steps they are taking to address some of the issues that have been raised that, of course, we all know are real, the investigations into the murder of Ahmed Swale, the incidents of national security officials abusing journalists and other actors. These are matters that the government cannot deny, and we would be looking forward to hearing the government what steps are being taken to help deal with these matters. So I believe that is a report that is valuable. As I said, even for the fact that it is triggering this conversation, and it is not only on this platform. Throughout the day, throughout yesterday, the conversation on many of the platforms has been about this report. And to that extent, indeed, it is something that is valuable for our reflections and for our engagement with the government.
I mean, Professor, let me ask you finally on this last round of as we wrap up. How then should our government approach be to this report? What should government posture be to it?
Look, let me make a first point and then respond to what government, or say something about what government's response should be. We are having a conversation about a report that the content have been raised, discussed by local activists who themselves have shown agency, strength, determination, and bravery in raising their voices and organizing against developments in their country that goes against the tenets of our Constitution, the words of our national anthem, and the pledge. And it is that recognition that I think we should give to the people of this country, first and foremost. The U.S.'s interest in all the contents of that report are temporary, they are ephemeral, and they are located within U.S. interest and not within the interest of the Ghanaian people. That is what we should understand. That's number one. In terms of what the government might possibly, or how the government might possibly react, I'm not sure.
But what should they do? What should they do?
There's been a certain limited response, even in cases where the U.S. Embassy in Accra, and I gave the example of this undocumented or unsubstantiated information that was used for a travel advisory, that the government of Ghana was quiet, which what I felt was most unfortunate. Now, our position on the Security Council, and I think Honorable Ablakwe's good point about geopolitics and the role of China, and now what is happening in Europe, means that Ghana has become an important player, albeit only for the next 2 years. So the government can decide to basically use backdoor channel and not have a frontal or a confrontational response. My assessment is that, except in cases, I haven't read the report, but from what Okujoto Ablakwa read, except in cases where the report did not provide specific evidence around the allegations that it made, there may be some subtle noise. But I'm not really expecting a robust frontal, confrontational dismissal of some of the allegations in that report.
Prof, thank you. Mr. Black, that same question. What should government posture be to this? And by the way, let's indicate, my producers have tried to get a government response since yesterday, in fact, when the report first came to light. We haven't been successful to get a government response to this. When we do, we'll definitely bring it. How should government respond to this?
Government should study this report. There are so many issues raised that have not been properly dealt with. Government has not brought closure. If you take the attacks on journalists, investigations that were promised, it's not clear what happened. If you take the killings during the elections of 2020, the National Election Security Task Force put out a statement that they were going to investigate. The IGP said they will investigate. That's the last we heard about that matter. Nothing has happened. Shraj as well. It's clear that the international community is expectant of its report on those those killings. You take our internationally acclaimed peace operations record, where since our first deployment in the Congo in 1960, we have become always a top 10 troops contributing country to United Nations peace operations across the world. If it is now emerging that on the matter to do with those, transactional sex, the sexual harassment in Sudan, the international community, the United Nations, is waiting on our government to act, at least just, assure the international community that you've looked at the evidence, you are either taking sanctions or you have tried them and they have been cleared. Bring closure. So there are all of these matters, including the attacks on journalists in particular. The judiciary also, steps to clear its name. So all of these institutions, including my own institution, Parliament, how our colleague, the Honorable Kennedy Japan, continues to drag our name through the mud. The Privileges Committee doesn't seem to be taking action. I expect the Speaker of Parliament as well to take a serious view of this report and be now more aggressive in pursuing these matters and bringing closure to them. So all of us in the entire governance architecture, the three arms of government, have work to do. And we must take steps so that the next report will not have all of these, outstanding issues. And it's as though impunity is reigning supreme, as the Americans are saying.
Dr. Blocker, thank you very much. Prof, I'm grateful. Suleiman Abraham, thank you also for joining us. We'll see what happens in the next report and whether government finally gets to respond to some of these very, very serious allegations made against our government, including unlawful killings, etc. Enjoy the rest of the evening.